There are plenty of reasons to cut back on drinking, from the health benefits to saving money, even improving relationships. But there's another reason that I don't see many people talking about, and it's that alcohol is secretly making your favorite video games less fun. I've been sober for 2 years now, and one of the most unexpected side effects was that games started to become more exciting to me. I assumed this was just circumstantial. With my weekends less focused on drinking, I had extra time to spend on gaming. But what I discovered is that there was actually a deeper scientific explanation for what was happening. Quitting alcohol didn't just change my habits, it changed how my brain processes gaming altogether. The first signal I noticed was in my mood toward certain games and genres. I found myself more curious to explore types of games that weren't really aligned to my established tastes. Puzzle games, in particular, were a category that I started to look at with fresh eyes. The tile placement game, Dorfromantik, which I had once thought verged on pointlessness, now felt kind of pleasant and relaxing. Same story with A Monster's Expedition. I began looking forward to bedtime because it meant spending 20 or 30 minutes messing around with log geometry. My tolerance for challenge increased too. I've never been a hardcore max difficulty gamer, and to be clear, I'm still not that. But I did start to find myself more open to the concept of losing. That sting I used to feel from an unexpected death in Hades wasn't as acute as it had once been. My craving for constant progress in games started to take a back seat to a newer desire, to just experience the most from them. At this point, I realized that there must be something else going on here. Why would giving up alcohol have such a profound effect on how much I enjoyed games? I wasn't even drinking while I was playing for the most part. Drinking was just a separate habit that I had formed, an activity I used to do on the weekends. This connection didn't become clear until I discovered the powerful relationship between alcohol, video games, and the reward systems in our brain. I had been looking at each habit as a separate part of my life, but in reality, they were deeply intertwined. Once I understood this, the puzzle pieces started to fall in place, and it all hinged on a concept that everyone watching is familiar with: the idea of balance. I remember the first time I caught myself gorging on video games. It was late summer of my 3rd or 4th year in elementary school. My camps had all ended by that point, so my mom was just stuck with me at home for hours on end. And at the time, I was grinding Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones, trying to unlock every character in the game. I'd lay in bed with my Game Boy, playing for like 3 or 4 hours at a time, and I would only take breaks for meals and the occasional cartoon intermission. After existing in this state for a number of days, I started to feel my levels of distress building. The routine was actually beginning to feel painful. I had attributed this to boredom. I thought I must have just gotten sick of the game I was playing. But playing other games didn't make me feel better. It wasn't until my mom intervened, forced me to go outside and play with the neighborhood kids, that my brain started to reset. At that point, I recognized that too much gaming had actually made me unhappy. But it would take another 20 years to fully understand why. My experience that summer was a perfect example of what Dr. Anna Lemke would describe as the seesaw of pleasure and pain. This is a key concept from her 2021 book, Dopamine Nation. As you can probably guess from the title, Dr. Lemke spends much of that book describing dopamine's role in the brain. You might be familiar with this feel-good neurotransmitter as it relates to our motivation and reward systems. But Lemke makes the case that dopamine is also highly involved in the formation of addictive behaviors. To demonstrate why, she illustrates the seesaw of pleasure and pain. When we engage in enjoyable activities, like eating sweets, watching a movie, or in my case, binging Fire Emblem, the seesaw will tip to the side of pleasure. Dopamine's released, and we feel good in the moment. But our brains are clever, and they actually don't want us to stay in this state of pleasure for too long. Because if we do, it'll start to threaten our ability to survive. So instead, the brain actually tries to maintain an equilibrium between pleasure and pain. When our balance is leaning too far toward pleasure, the brain will compensate by tilting the seesaw back toward pain. This is why intense pleasure can often be followed by feelings of discomfort, cravings, or withdrawal. Enter addiction. Because to prolong those feelings of pleasure and maximize our dopamine, we typically resort to two strategies. We start engaging in our chosen activity more frequently, and we increase its intensity or duration. So if we think back to the seesaw, both of those approaches will result in the same outcome. The more we push toward the side of pleasure, the more our brain will compensate with pain. This is how Dr. Lemke defines addiction: compulsive engagement in a behavior despite adverse consequences. We do it even though it hurts. The way I thought about my own drinking habit was the same as many of my friends who are in their late 20s and early 30s. We're not in college anymore, but drinking was still a fun social activity that we enjoyed. Whether I was having a few beers on the golf course or going to a friend's holiday party, I didn't see my drinking as an addiction. Occasionally, it did cause me pain, but not significantly more than for others I knew. My sobriety was, well, it was kind of an accident. For a while, I had been getting annoyed at the hangovers, and I started becoming aware that I wasn't enjoying drinking quite like I used to. But when I decided to do a dry month with my fiance, the plan at the time was not to quit entirely. After that month, though, I felt good. 1 month turned into 2 months, which turned into 6 months, then a year, and now 2 years. That's 730 days where there was no longer the consistent, bulky weight of alcohol-fueled dopamine pressing down on the pleasure side of my equilibrium. So what does that feel like? Well, as I alluded in the intro, all of that lifted weight meant my dopamine pathways could start to heal. Without the frequent stimulation of alcohol, I was suddenly open to experiencing deeper pleasure from other activities that I enjoyed. Cooking, sports, making music, and even playing video games. It was only after reading Dr. Lemke's book that the mystery of my increased excitement for gaming finally clicked. By removing alcohol, I had freed my brain to fully enjoy the natural dopamine rewards that video games provide. I was no longer overloading the pleasure side of my brain on weekends, which meant more satisfying play sessions and less risk of a painful counterbalance. Even though I saw drinking and gaming as two completely separate activities, the effects that each had on my dopamine balance were constantly present, and combined, their total weight had slowly eroded my ability to feel good from their dopamine release. I don't blame my brain for this. It had adapted to reduce my baseline levels of pleasure so that I didn't become a zombie with no will to engage with the world. But as a result, my favorite form of entertainment had started to lose its luster. As I reflected on this, I realized that my brain had actually given me an ultimatum. It was forcing me to pick which high dopamine activity I wanted in my life. Now, of course, I could have experimented with reducing my frequency of both drinking and gaming. And I think for many people, that's a perfectly reasonable route to take. But for me, my brain had given me this serendipitous clarity. It made me see that drinking no longer held significant value in my life, but gaming was still something I loved. A year into my sobriety, it was impossible to deny how much brighter my life was. I felt better, I was sleeping better, and I was racking up huge karma points for being the permanent designated driver among my friends. But most importantly for me, I had found an abundance of creative energy that I hadn't felt since college. Paired with a notable increase in free time on the weekends, this paved the foundation for a project that I don't think would have happened if I was still drinking. This YouTube channel was born from my sobriety. If you clicked on this video, I'm assuming you already have some relationship with both alcohol and video games. So my question to you is, what does your balance look like? How much weight are you tipping onto the pleasure side of your seesaw? Drinking was a major factor in my own dopamine balance. But for some of you, there may be additional pleasure-seeking activities in the mix. Smoking or vaping, gambling, junk food, these can all have similar impacts as alcohol had on my life. In excess, they dilute your enjoyment of other healthier forms of pleasure. My sobriety took root before I knew any of this, but my hope is that those of you watching can take advantage of this knowledge to make a deliberate change in your life. If you value video games and you care more about enjoying gaming than you do getting drunk or betting on sports, I would urge you to reflect on your habits. Write out everything on the pleasure side of your seesaw and ask yourself whether you care equally about all of them. If the answer is yes, then maybe it's a question of how much rather than if. But if you look at that list and see a clear separation between what's important to you and what's not, that is a perfect opportunity for action. All right, if you're comfortable getting a little personal in the comments, I'd love to know what your dopamine balance looks like. The goal is not to shame anyone. It's to have an honest conversation about how we manage the abundance of pleasurable activities that are accessible to us in the modern world. And if this video struck a chord, please go read Dr. Lemke's book, which I've linked in the description. This is the most important book I've read as an adult, and I promise it's worth your attention. As always, and especially this time, thank you for watching. I really hope this video can help someone else out there. If you found some value in it, don't forget to leave a like so that YouTube will push it out to more gamers like us. Take care, y'all. I'll see you guys in the next one.